She'll bring me peace when I'm hard at work.
Here's the song Berry Lady, and I want to go over the process I use for reamping some of these tracks. In this case, I'm reamping the bass DI that I recorded. All the songs on this EP have an electric bass DI. Usually, or in many cases, the bass DI signal is great for the bass. You can use virtual amps or even just apply EQ, compression, maybe a little bit of distortion, and it'll sound great. However, I also really like the sound of a bass amp. Add some character or some flavor in there that I feel like this song could really use. So let's take a listen to the bass DI track real quick. See, it sounds nice and thick. I like the performance because I already made edits to it. So it's where I'd like it to be right now. Let's go ahead and hear it in context of the song. I have the bass up in volume a little bit so we can make sure we can hear it for the video. It already sounds great as it is, but let's go ahead and just reamp the signal to see what it could do. So what I did is I've selected the output of this track to go out one of my outputs on my interface. From that audio interface output, I went into a reamp box. I have a radial reamp box. I like it a lot. And then from the reamp box, I have an instrument level signal that I can plug into my amp. I have a little Fender Frontman amp, and while it won't give me much response in those low bass frequencies because the amp is smaller, it will give me some character in the higher end, in the higher frequencies, and that's what I'm after here. I can use the bass DI to kind of cover all those lower bass frequencies, and then I can use the bass amp signal to give a little bit more flavor in the top end, hopefully making it poke out in the mix just a little bit more. Reamping it this way also gives me the control over all of the features of the amp, like the little EQ section or a drive section. I can tweak all those knobs as it's playing back from Pro Tools, which I can't do when I'm actually playing it if I were to plug directly into the amp, because it's just me. I don't have an assistant engineer with me. So this will give me a little bit more control over the bass amp process. I have a large diaphragm condenser about 1.5 feet away from the bass amp. So let's go ahead and see what it sounds like. I'll go into Record Enable, and I'm going to start at the very beginning of the song so that if there's any sync issues later on down the road, I know that this audio clip recorded always is going to start at the very beginning of the Pro Tools session song. I've also gone through and made appropriate edits to the entire bass track so I know that it's lining up to the grid in the way I like, so I can just hit record and play the entire song through. I won't do that for this video. Let's just do it according to this first little portion right here. Great, let's get out of Record Enable so we don't make any mistakes and record over it on accident. Let's go ahead and hear these both together. I've highlighted both, I hit Shift S. Now we can hear them together. Seems like there's a little bit of phasiness happening there. Some of the frequencies are kind of missing and it doesn't have that full feeling. So let's go ahead and just put a break in it so we can adjust the phase on this section. We'll leave this one alone so we can hear an A and B. We can test them out and see what they sound like when we fix the phase. Let's go ahead and zoom into the very beginning. Now, the reason why there's perhaps a phase issue here is because I'm going out of Pro Tools. That means I'm using a digital to analog converter to go from my interface to my reamp box to the amp. And then from the amp, that goes to the microphone, and the microphone is using the analog to digital converter, which of course has a little bit of latency in there, just a little bit. But now we have a doubling up of the latency from the converters, so it might record the bass amp signal slightly later in time and then messing with the phase. Now, I already made sure that the phase was correct before I started recording. I moved the microphone around until I got it to a good place, but let's go ahead and check this out now. What we're looking for is clues to where my waveforms can line up. And I can tell right off the bat, this is a great section to pay attention to because I have this nice little uptick right there, and then going into the negatives and then going into the positives right there. And that probably lines up with this right here. This changed a little bit because the amp is giving it a different flavor or some different frequency response, but that is going to line up with this right there. So all I have to do is use my grabber tool and move it. If I want to get much more detailed with it, you see this cross point right here where it goes from the negatives to the positives. If I click right up on that, right where it intersects, and then I make a marker by hitting enter on the numpad, I can use that marker to adjust this right there. And in the video, you might not be able to see it, but there's a faint line right here intersecting perfectly right there. So this is looking pretty good to me right now. And I can also tell that we are in phase. When we go into the negatives here, we go into the negatives here. If this was out of phase, it would look like this. Notice how my DI signal goes into the negatives, while my bass DI signal or my bass amp signal goes into the positives. That's out of phase. It'll sound kind of funny. It sounds a little hollow, but if I undo that and we're perfectly in phase now, let's go ahead and see what this sounds like where I have it lined up and everything's in phase, or right here where it's not perfectly in phase. So here it is lined up. And now it's not going to be lined up. It's a small difference, but let's hear that again. Lined up right here, not lined up right here. It's actually quite a small difference, but I like getting it set up right just so I don't have to track down any problems later down the road. So this is feeling a lot better. Let's go ahead and hear this in the context of the song. I do have that bass amp quite low. Let's go ahead and hear what it sounds like by itself. I get a lot more of that clickiness out of it and a lot more of those high frequencies, but there are essentially no lows in there. But when you play them together in the mix, it kind of pokes out just a little bit more. Here it is without the bass amp signal. Now with the bass amp signal in there. It kind of gives it a growl that I really like for this track. Now you might be wondering, how come I didn't just record the bass amp and the DI at the same time? I absolutely could. However, where I recorded the bass, I recorded it in a location and at a time where I can't be quite loud. That's perhaps why recording bass DI is so attractive, is you can essentially record at your home studio. But by doing it this way, I can play over and over and over. I can get the bass to be exactly what I want in its performance, and then I don't have to have it be super loud for my neighbors or anything like that. And this way, I just do one recording of the entire bass track, and it will be about 3 minutes or 4 minutes or however long the entire song is.